Hello and welcome to the Grade 4 Essentials for GCSE Maths course. The course is split into 4 modules. You've got number and ratio, which is this one. Then you've got geometry and measure. Then you've got algebra and graphs. And finally, statistics and probability. You can do those modules in any order, but I would recommend that you start with this section, number basics and indices. So here's just a quick outline of what we're going to be covering in this section. So first we've got key terms, number types and properties. So we'll be looking at vocabulary like sum, difference, product, factor, integer, prime number, square number, cube number, square root, and so on. Making sure you understand what those are and which numbers they apply to. Then we've got rules of divisibility, which is all about knowing whether you can divide a number by a certain number. So recognizing whether a particular number is in the 3 times table, even if it's 5,000 and something, for example. Then we've got 4 operations, so adding, subtracting, multiplying and dividing, all the stuff you did in primary school and that you might still struggle with some aspects of. Then we look at place value, sorting numbers into order, multiplying and dividing by 10, 100, 1,000, and also 0.1 and 0.01, and what effect that has on the place values. And then doing the same thing, but with powers of 10. So we're multiplying and dividing by 10 squared, 10 to the power 3, 10 to the power -1, and so on. Then we look at directed numbers, which is positive and negative numbers. So doing arithmetic with them, adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, and sorting them into order. Then we've got order of operations, which you probably know as BIDMAS or BODMAS. But I also introduce an alternative acronym called GEMMA or GEMMA, which you might find a bit easier. Then we look at multiplying and dividing with decimals and using these kind of approaches to make deductions from known results. So if you are given the answer to a calculation, say 218 times 37, you can work out what that answer is divided by 3.7 and so on. A bit on using a calculator. Rounding, you've got to be able to round to the nearest whole number, the nearest 10, the nearest 100, the nearest tenth, the nearest hundredth, and so on. We also do rounding to decimal places and rounding to significant figures, which is probably the hardest one to get your head around. Also looking at bounds, upper and lower bounds, and using one significant figure to estimate a calculation. So you round each of the numbers in the calculation to one significant figure to make it easier to get a rough idea of what the answer is going to be. Then we look at factors and multiples, so doing prime factor trees, and highest common factor, lowest common multiple, including using Venn diagrams to do these. And finally, indices and standard form. So talking about square number, cube numbers, and square and cube roots of numbers, indices, powers, and the rules that you need to remember when you're dealing with indices. And foundation maths also includes negative indices, although that's the top end. So you can probably get away without those if you do struggle with them. And standard form. If you're doing the Edexcel iGCSE, you don't need standard form, but if you're doing GCSE, then you do. Now, each of the videos in this section is between about 5 and 15 minutes long, but they include opportunities for you to practice your skills. So you'll be prompted to pause the video, have a go at the question, and then come back to go through the answers. So actually working through the videos will take longer than the running time, possibly twice as long. There's about 2.5 hours of running time in this section, which means that it will probably take you somewhere in the region of 5 hours to work through the whole lot properly. And then there are quizzes for you to check what you can remember from the various sections. So that's the end of this introduction. I hope you find the course helpful, and I would appreciate any feedback you'd like to give me.